If you look around carefully, beloved, you will realize that we do not have much time left to prepare. We share experiences on this platform that show that the days we are now living in were seen coming, and now we are right in the middle of them. Today, God, by His mercy, is revealing the places, and when I say places, I mean the states that are safe. When things get intense, it is safer to be in those places. Wherever you are across the globe watching this, tell us where you are watching from so we can pray with you. Also, if you are concerned about what is happening, please drop a word of prayer. It is very important and will go a long way in bringing stability in the face of what is happening. I will begin sharing today's experience. Hello, brothers and sisters. I will try to be so brief and go straight to what Jesus showed me concerning what is to come. I had this experience 2 months ago when I saw what is happening across the globe. It's dawned on me that Jesus reveals to me this day, and most importantly, He showed me the safe place to be as things get out of hands. But it's my prayer that in no time, every catastrophe should stop. I had been trying to get this surgery done for a long time, and when the hospital finally called me in, I felt relieved. I was not afraid of the surgery itself. I had bigger things to worry about at that point in my life. And to be honest, getting the surgery done felt like one less thing on my list. My wife drove me there. She held my hand in the waiting room and told me everything was going to be fine. I nodded and told her I believed her. When the anesthesiologist came in, he was a tall man with glasses. He introduced himself and told me that what he was about to give me would make me feel very relaxed and that I would fall asleep quickly. He said when I woke up, the procedure would already be done. He made it sound so simple, like switching off a light and switching it back on. I nodded at him. He started to push the medicine into the IV. I remember feeling the cold travel up my arm. Then my eyes got heavy. Not just tired heavy. Heavy like the weight of something I could not lift. My thoughts started to break apart. The ceiling tiles blurred into one flat white shape, and then I went under. But I did not go to the place I was supposed to go. There was no darkness waiting for me. At least not the kind of darkness you expect when you are unconscious. I did not float in nothing. I did not see blank space. Instead, something happened that I still do not have the right words to fully explain. It was like being moved, like being physically carried from one place and set down in another. And the next thing I knew, I was standing outside. Not inside the hospital. Outside. On solid ground. On a ridge. On top of a ridge that looked over a massive, open field that went as far as I could see in every direction. I looked around me slowly. The sky above me was a deep purple color, the kind of purple that you only see right before a storm. That means business. The clouds were thick and heavy, and they did not move the way normal clouds move. They sat there like something was pressing down on them from above. The air had a smell to it, a sharp, heavy smell like something burning that was not wood and not rubber. I could feel it in my nose and in the back of my throat. I did not like the smell, but I did not move from where I was standing. I was too confused to move. I just stood there and looked around and tried to understand where I was. Then I looked down at the ground in front of me, and I saw it. There was a gear in the ground. Not a small gear, not the kind you find inside a clock or a bicycle. This was an enormous gear, the size of a building. It was half buried in the dirt so that only the top half of it was visible. But even just the half that was above the ground was taller than most houses I have ever seen. It was made of metal, old metal, the kind that has been sitting outside for a very long time. It was covered in a thick coat of rust, the kind of deep rust that takes decades to form. There were plants growing all over it, thick green vines that had wrapped themselves around every edge and every tooth of that giant gear. I stood there and looked at it, and I did not know what to think. My first thought was that I was dreaming. My second thought was that this was not the kind of dream I had ever had before. It felt too real. The ground under my feet felt real. The smell in the air felt real. The sound of the wind felt real. And then the vines started to move. At first I thought I was imagining it. I blinked and looked again. But the vines were definitely moving. They were not swaying in the wind. They were tightening. Each vine was pulling itself closer around the metal of the gear, squeezing it like a hand, squeezing something it wants to hold on to. And then, slowly, the gear began to turn. It moved like something that had been asleep for a very long time, and was now being forced awake. It groaned. That is the only word I can use. It groaned, a deep, low, metal sound that I could feel in my chest and in my feet through the ground. It turned slowly, then a little faster, then faster still. The vines that were wrapped around it were pulling, and the gear was answering. Dust came up from the ground around it. Sparks started flying off the metal where things were grinding together. The sound kept building, louder and louder, until it was all I could hear. I wanted to cover my ears, but I was frozen. I could not make my hands move. I could not make my feet move. I just stood there with that noise filling everything around me. Then the clouds above me broke apart. Not slowly, not the way clouds normally separate. They split open fast like something had cut through them from above, and a light came down through the opening. It was white, not the white of a lamp or a flashlight or even the sun. It was a different kind of white. It was the kind of white that makes everything else around it look gray. It was so bright that it should have hurt my eyes, but it did not. I looked straight at it and I could see clearly. The light came down and touched the plain below, and a shadow stretched out from where it landed. A long, wide shadow that reached across the ground all the way to where I was standing. And from that shadow, something moved. A figure came forward. A person, walking, but not quite the way people walk. There was a calmness to how this person moved that I cannot properly describe. Not rushed, not slow either. Just certain, like every step was exactly where it was supposed to be. He came closer and I could see him better. He was tall. He had a beard that was long enough to rest on his chest. His hair fell past his shoulders. His eyes were the kind of blue that I do not think I have ever seen in real life before or since. Not the light blue of a clear sky. Deeper than that, calmer than that. His clothing was white, but not the white of a shirt or a coat. It was different. It looked like it had light in it, like the cloth itself was giving off something. I knew who he was. I knew it the moment I saw him. I did not know how to explain how I knew. There was no introduction. There was no name tag. There was nothing that said, "This is who this person is." I just knew. The way you sometimes know something in a dream and you accept it completely, without needing to ask why. Except this was not a dream. He walked up and stood beside me. He did not look at me right away. He looked at the gear. The gear was still spinning, faster now, sending dust and sparks into the air around it. We both stood there looking at it for a moment, and then he spoke. He told me that what I was seeing was a beginning. He did not say it like a warning. He said it calmly, the way a person says something that they have already accepted themselves. His voice was gentle. It did not boom. It did not shake the ground. It was just a voice. A calm, steady voice. He told me that what was in front of us was a picture of the world that exists now. The world where war is not something in a history book, but something being built again, day by day, nation by nation. He told me that the turning of the gear was the turning of something that has been set in motion and would not easily be stopped. I kept looking at the gear as he spoke. The vines were still pulling at it, still tightening. And as I watched, I could see that the metal was beginning to show signs of strain. Cracks were forming around the places where the vines gripped the tightest. The gear was turning so fast now that the teeth were almost invisible. And then, without any warning, it happened. The gear broke, not all at once. It started with a loud crack, the kind that sounds like something large and heavy hitting concrete from a great height. Then another crack, then another. Then the whole thing came apart. The metal split and shattered and pieces flew in every direction. Some of the pieces were small and some were as large as cars. They fell to the ground all across the plain below us. The sound stopped the moment the gear broke. 1 second it was deafening. The next second, nothing. Just silence. a silence that felt almost as heavy as the noise had been. He told me to look at what was left. I looked at the pieces scattered across the plain. They were everywhere, and he told me that this was how things would look. He said the world I know and the country I live in would be broken, scattered, and then put back together through great difficulty. He did not say this to frighten me. He said it the way a doctor tells you something hard, because you need to hear it so you can prepare. Then he turned his face toward the horizon. I looked too. In the distance, I could see fire. Not campfires, not controlled fires, big fires. The kind that swallow whole buildings, cities. I could see what looked like entire cities burning. The orange glow of it stretched along the horizon like a second sunset. He told me that what I was seeing were the beginnings of wars, not small disputes, not disagreements between two countries that get worked out after a few years. Real wars. Wars that would involve many nations. Wars that would come quickly, not slowly. He said many people would expect things to build up over a long period of time, the way wars used to begin. But he showed me that this would not be that kind of war. He said the escalation would be fast, the kind of fast that catches people unprepared. He told me that fear and anger would drive people to turn against each other in ways that they would not have believed possible a few years before it happened. People would need someone to blame. People always need someone to blame when things go wrong. And they would find each other. Then a map appeared in the air in front of us. I do not know how else to say it. It simply appeared, like someone held up a piece of paper, but it was not paper. It hung in the air, and it was detailed. I could see state lines. I could see city names. I could see the shape of the country I have lived in my whole life. It was a map of the United States. As I looked at it, I saw red dots appear on it. One by one they appeared, some of the big cities, some of the coastal areas, and then lines began to draw themselves between those dots. Thick red lines. He told me that those lines showed where the fighting and the movement of people and supplies would be concentrated. The places marked with red would be the places most heavily affected, the places where things would be the hardest. But then he pointed to 5 areas on the map that had no red on them. 5 states sitting in the middle of the country. He told me about each one. The first one he pointed to was Kansas. He told me about it in simple terms. He said it is flat and open land, and it is not the kind of place that becomes a target in the way that bigger cities or coastal regions do. He said the people there are working people who know how to take care of themselves and each other. The second one was Nebraska. He told me that the people there are not ones who are easily pulled into conflict. They are steady, quiet, the kind of community that keeps its head down and keeps going when the rest of the world is falling apart. He pointed to South Dakota after that, then North Dakota, then Montana. He talked about all 3 of them in a similar way. He told me that these 5 states would not be completely untouched by what was coming. Nothing would be completely untouched, but they would be places where people could find some level of safety and stability when other parts of the country became impossible to live in. He was very careful about this point. He did not say that he had chosen these places as holy ground. He did not promise that going to one of these states meant a person would be protected by some special force. He said they were not targeted places. He said they were not in the path of the worst of it, not because God had put a shield over them, but simply because of where they sat and how they were organized and what they were not. That was an important thing he wanted me to understand. He was not making a spiritual promise about geography. He was showing me what the landscape of what was coming looked like. He paused then. There was a moment of quiet, and then he told me there were 4 specific things that would come with the war. Not just fighting, not just bombs and guns. 4 things that would affect ordinary people in ways that might even be harder to deal with than the fighting itself for most of them. The first thing he showed me was what happens to money. He showed me banks. Banks with their doors closed during the hours they should be open. I saw signs on the doors of banks. The kinds of signs businesses put up when they have to shut. I saw people standing outside those banks in long lines, and those people had a look on their faces that I recognized immediately as panic. Not the kind of panic where someone screams and runs, the quiet kind. The kind where a person stands very still and stares at a closed door and understands that the thing they thought was safe is no longer safe. He showed me what the stock market looked like when it did not just dip the way it sometimes does, but when it dropped and kept dropping with nothing stopping it. He showed me people on television screens looking at numbers, and the numbers were numbers that meant the kind of money that people had saved their whole lives was now worth almost nothing. He told me that the thing people put their confidence in would fail. He said what you have in your hand will matter more than what you have in any account. He said people would need to return to depending on things they could actually touch and hold and use directly. The second thing he showed me was what happens when the way goods move from one place to another stops working. He showed me highways. Normally a highway is full of trucks going somewhere carrying something. He showed me highways where the trucks had stopped, where they sat on the side of the road because the fuel was gone or the roads ahead were blocked or the system that kept everything organized had broken down. I saw grocery store shelves that were empty, not the way a store gets when there is a storm coming and people buy everything quickly. Truly empty, shelves with nothing on them and no new boxes coming to replace what was taken. He showed me gas stations where the pumps were off and the tanks underneath were dry. He showed me fields of food, crops that were fully grown and ready to be picked, but they were left there because there was no one to harvest them or no way to get them to the people who needed them. He told me that people would have to learn things they had forgotten or never learned. How to grow food from the ground, how to find food in places they would not normally think to look, how to store food in ways that do not depend on electricity to keep it good. The third thing he showed me was the lights going out, not a blackout that lasts a night, the way it sometimes happens when a storm knocks down power lines. He showed me cities going dark and staying dark, days without power, then weeks, then in some places months. He showed me what people do when they do not have electricity, how everything changes, how the things we use every day without thinking about them stop working. The refrigerator stops keeping food cold. The heater stops running in winter. The phone stops charging. He showed me families sitting in their homes in the dark trying to figure out what to do. He told me that people would need to learn to do the things they gave up doing when electricity made everything easier. How to keep warm without a furnace. How to cook without a stove that plugs in. How to see at night when there is no light switch to flip. He said those who had thought ahead, who had prepared, who had not left everything to the systems around them, those people would be in a far better position than those who had not. The fourth thing he showed me was harder to watch than the others. He showed me what happens to communities when everything else falls apart at the same time. He showed me streets that I would normally recognize as regular American neighborhoods turned into places I could barely believe I was looking at. People fighting over things that would normally never cause a fight. Food, water, space. He showed me stores being broken into, not by strangers coming from outside, but by people from the same neighborhood. He showed me police who were too few and too overwhelmed to hold back what was happening. He showed me people who had once been neighbors now looking at each other with suspicion, with fear, with anger. He told me that the law people relied on to keep things in order would be stretched further than it could hold. He said people would have to think about protecting themselves, their families, and whoever they had around them in ways that most Americans have not needed to think about in a very long time. He said community would either become the thing that saves people or the thing that breaks people, depending on what is built before any of this begins. After he showed me those four things, he went back to talking about the 5 states. He told me that those places would have all of these same problems. He did not want me to think that moving to one of those states would mean escaping what was coming. People in Kansas and Nebraska and the Dakotas and Montana would still feel the financial collapse. The shelves in their stores would also be emptier than before. They would also deal with power going out and the difficulties that follow. Communities in those places would also face tension and difficulty. But he said the scale of it would be different. Not that it would be easy, just that it would be more manageable. That people living in those places would have more room to breathe, more ability to hold things together, more chances to find stability when the rest of the country was struggling to find any at all. It was quiet again for a moment after all of that. I was still standing beside him and I was feeling a lot of things at once. I was not crying, but I felt like I was close to it. Not from fear exactly, more from the weight of what I had just been shown. The way you feel when someone trusts you with something very serious and very real. He looked at me and his expression was not harsh. It was not the look of someone who is glad to deliver bad news. It was more like the look of someone who is telling you hard things because they care about you and they need you to be ready. Then he told me about something that gave me the first real feeling of peace since I arrived in that place. He pointed to the distance, to a hill that I had not noticed before. On that hill, there was a group of people. I could not count them exactly from where I was standing, but there were many of them. The mumtom, their arms were lifted up and their heads were tilted back. He told me that those were the people who pray. He called them the seniors, meaning the older ones, the people who have been in the faith for a long time, who know what it means to call out to God and stay there calling until something changes. He told me that they were standing in a gap, which he explained to me as standing between what is coming and the people who have not yet seen it, holding that space open through prayer. He told me that the people who pray are not people who sit in a safe place and hope things work out. He said they know what is happening. They feel the weight of what is coming. But instead of running or hiding, they stand and pray. He said that kind of prayer matters. He said God hears it. He said it is not wasted. He turned back to me and looked at me directly. He told me that this moment, this vision, this experience I was having, was not just for me alone. He said he was giving it to me because I was supposed to carry it. He was asking me to go back and tell people what I had seen, not to make people afraid. Fear was already something the enemy was using. He mentioned the enemy specifically, saying that what drives fear and chaos and the impulse to give up is not an accident. There is something working to make people believe there is no hope, that things are already decided, that it is too late to do anything. He told me that none of that is true. He told me that even in the middle of what is coming, there is something that can be done. He asked people to pray, not as a casual thing, not as something done once a week on a specific day and then set aside. He asked for real prayer, the kind that costs something, the kind that a person comes to because they actually believe that praying changes things. He said that the faithful, the ones who call out to him, are heard. He said he sees the people who are standing in prayer. He said he sees them the way a father sees children who are trying very hard. He placed his hand on my shoulder. I have thought about that moment many times since it happened. The weight of his hand on my shoulder was not heavy the way a hand is heavy. It was solid. That is the only word I can reach for. It felt solid and warm and it went through me somehow. Not painfully, just through me. And immediately I felt something leave my body. The tightness in my chest that I had been carrying since I arrived in that place went away. The confusion went down. I still had questions, but the questions were not sitting on top of me anymore. I could breathe with them. He smiled at me. And then he spoke the last words I heard from him in that place. He told me to go back. He told me to tell people what I had seen. He told me not to be afraid of telling it, not to hold back the hard parts to make it easier to hear, but also not to tell it in a way designed to cause panic. He said to tell the truth of it and let people decide what to do with it. He reminded me of something that is said about him, that he does not leave, that he does not abandon. He told me to pass that on, that in the middle of all of it, in the middle of the broken gear and the burning cities and the empty shelves and the dark streets, he is not absent. He is there. That was the thing he most wanted me to make sure I said. And then he walked back toward the light. I watched him go. He did not look back. He just walked, calm and certain, the way he had arrived, and the light received him, and then he was gone. The plane started to disappear around me. The purple sky faded. The ridge under my feet lost its solidity. The heavy smell in the air went away. Everything became the dark again, the moving dark of anesthesia pulling me back down, and this time it did not resist me. It took me back and it held me, and I went. I opened my eyes in the hospital room. If you are reading this and you live in one of those 5 states, I am not telling you that you are safe in every meaning of the word. What I am telling you is what I was shown, which is that those places will carry less of the direct impact than other places. But prepare still. Prepare the way a person prepares when they take seriously what they have been told. Keep food that lasts. Know how your family will stay warm without electricity. Know your neighbors and build trust with them now, before trust becomes the thing everyone needs and not everyone has. If you are reading this and you are a person of faith, pray. I do not say that casually. I say it because that was the clearest instruction I received. Pray with intention. Pray with persistence. Do not pray once and consider it done. The people I saw on that hill were not taking turns saying a quick prayer and going home. They were standing. They were committed to the standing. If you are reading this and you do not know what to believe, I understand that. I am not asking you to believe my experience. I am asking you to consider the possibility that what I saw has something in it worth thinking about. The financial system is something many people already feel uncertain about. Supply chains are something people have already seen fail, at least partially, in recent years. Power outages are already something communities deal with in difficult seasons. These are not completely foreign ideas. They are things that already live at the edges of what most people quietly worry about. What I was told to say is that in the middle of all of it, there is someone who knows exactly what is happening and is not absent from it. That was the message I was trusted with. That was the thing I was sent back to say. I think about the gear a lot. The way it was turning. The way it broke. The way the pieces fell everywhere. And I think about the silence that came after the breaking. It was not a hopeless silence. It was the kind of silence that comes before something new, before things are picked up and put back together in a different shape. I do not know how long the rebuilding will take. He did not tell me that. But he told me that there would be a rebuilding, and he told me that the people standing on the hill, the ones praying, the ones who keep showing up to pray even when nothing around them looks like it is changing yet, those people are part of how the rebuilding happens. I have told my wife now. I have told my children. I have told some people from my church. Some of them believe me. Some of them are not sure what to believe. I do not argue with anyone about it. That is not what I was sent back to do. I was sent back to tell it. What each person does with it belongs to them. I am still the same ordinary person I was before that Tuesday morning. I still wake up and make coffee and check my phone and drive the same roads I have always driven. But something is different. The way I see things is different. When I watch the news and I see countries arguing over things that could easily lead to something bigger, I think of what I was shown. When I see prices going up in stores and people talking about the economy in worried voices, I think of what I was shown. When I hear about power failures or read about trucks not being able to deliver goods somewhere, I think of what I was shown.